Okay, so let's have a look at the flowers. The flowers I made before, if I just hide the vase 2 and bring back my vase and flowers, I've got a lot of flowers, and I think it looks kind of nice. I'll just hide my vase modifiers. But really, to have this big bunch of flowers, all we need to do is make one petal and one, gosh, I always forget the technical names of flowers. What's this called? One anther and one, I named them before, filament. There we go. And then we can duplicate everything. And all of this nice rippliness and all of this, we're going to model procedurally. So in this flower modeling exercise, the reason I'm doing this, I'm showing you a very simple introduction into procedural modeling. Royce will talk about this in class, but procedural modeling is where we use, mathematics and patterns to make some of the shapes for us. And it's especially useful in this case for organic objects like flowers. We wouldn't want to have to sculpt all of this. That would take hours. Instead, we can do it procedurally. Okay, so let's get started and let's make the flowers. All right. Okay, I'll keep my new vase and I'll hide my one with the modifiers. All right, the reason I'm keeping the vase here is just to give me an idea of the scale, because I'm going to start with a petal and I need to decide how big it's going to be. So to get started, let's add Shift A. We're going to add a plane, and that's going to be our first petal. So I'll press S for scale. I'll scale it right down. Maybe I'll look from the top, and I'll bring it over here. Okay, that's cool. I'm going to name it petal. And then we'll just do a tiny bit of modeling on it. So I'll press SX and I'll scale it something like that. I'll go into edit mode, press T and T, so I've got my my tools here. I'm going to do some loop cuts. I'll do something like, I'll do some loop cuts on the length first, and then I'm going to go into vertex mode. I'm going to grab these two, SY, make that thin. That's going to be where the sort of petal SY touch, joins up with the plant. Then we're going to have a wide bit, another wide bit, GX, SY to scale, GX, and maybe what I can do, if I select this edge, I can even extrude on the X value to keep it straight, and then I can scale it on the Y value, GX, and maybe scale this one, SY. Something like that. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be super great for now. Maybe I'll just scale that a little bit more. That'll do. Okay, now I'm going to add a couple more loop cuts. Going to do 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's cool. And now we're going to use the proportional editing tool to just bend it kind of into the shape of a petal. So I'll press my middle mouse and just go back into a perspective view. And I'm going to stay in edge mode, and I'm going to select these edges here along the end, turn on my proportional editing, and I'm going to press GZ. And if you don't see the circle, remember, it's just your trackpad that'll make it get bigger and smaller. The circle might be really big and you might not see it. Just zoom in with your trackpad until you see it. And then the size of the circle represents the influence of the tool. So I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to grab these ones and GZ, bring them down a bit as well. Something like that. I might SY them a little bit, make it a little pointier. Okay, now I'm going to grab this middle part and GZ and get that sort of extra dimension of distortion here, which is what we'd expect from a petal. And maybe I'll grab the ones in the middle and just bring them up a bit. That's enough, I think. You can play around with it more if you like, but that's kind of the shape of a petal. I'm happy with that. All right, so let's see how it works out. We can always go back and change some of it in this very simple form. Before we do any procedural modeling to it, I want to apply my scale. So I'm going to press Command A and apply scale. Now we're going to add some modifiers again. So we're doing a very simple form of procedural modeling here. I'll click my modifiers tab, and first of all, I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier. Here there's two versions. Simple, it's just going to be subdividing all of your surfaces. If I apply that, you'll see I've just subdivided it. I'm going to undo that. If I put it on Catmull Clark, it also does some smoothing. So if I apply that, it's added more faces, but it's smoothed them. Okay, but I'm going to undo that because I want to keep my modifier unapplied. I just want to have it there so I can turn it on and off. So I can always re-edit my petal. Okay, now let's get the bumpiness of the petals in there. So I'll add another modifier, and this time it's going to be a displacement modifier. Okay, now our petal has disappeared. I'm just going to turn the strength here down to something like 0.1. So our petal is back, or maybe even more, 0.01. Okay, and now, okay, so what is the displace doing? First, we need to give it a texture. So I'm going to click New, and I'm going to go into this little tab here to go into the settings. And we can put anything we want here. We can put pictures, we can put your face, anything you want. I'm going to go into clouds, and that's just going to generate some noise. It's going to make this sort of randomized, smooth noise pattern. And what we want is we want that pattern to distort our shape. And the way that's working is that white pixels or light pixels are going to go up, and dark pixels, gray pixels, and black pixels will go down. So we're still not seeing anything, so I'm going to turn the scale on this down to something like 0.1 or maybe 0.01. Okay, until we start seeing the bumpiness. If the scale's really big, you know, we're probably just all in one area and we won't be seeing any distortion. But if we go down, let's go back to 0.01, we see the bumpiness, and that's good. If I add a little bit more subdivision, we will see even more bumpiness, because we need some faces to distort. If we don't have anything, there's no geometry for the subdivision to push around. We need some geometry. The only thing is, if you add a lot of these, this will eventually slow down your scene because you're adding a very, very large amount of geometry. Here it's kind of okay. We might not need that many, but at least we can kind of see what we're doing. So what I want to do now is just get the balance right of something that looks a little bit too rough for the petal. What I want is something more like, I'm going to make this a little bigger. Oh, that's too big. Let's try that. Oh, 0.01. Okay, so if I go 0.01, 0.03, it's too far. So what about 0.02? That looks a bit better. I might even say 0.025. That looks a little more lumpy. And now I'm going to turn the power on this up to 0.02. There we go. Okay, so now we're getting a little closer. I might still make the scale of the texture just a bit bigger. 3.5. There. Okay, that looks nice to me. I'm looking, I should have mentioned this. The flowers I'm looking at is the Oriental Lily. Sorry, I forgot to mention that earlier. And just because I really like it as a type of flower. And you can see that its petals are sort of like a bit bumpy, and then around the edge, they've got these lovely little ripples. So we've got, like, if you look at most of them, there's sort of a bit of a waving shape on them. They're not completely smooth. And then around the edges, there's a little bit of rippling. So that's what I'm trying to recreate. Okay, so let's, I might make that shape even bigger. Maybe 4, something like that. And now I'm going to add the little bit of rippling on the edges. Okay, so at the moment, all of our displacement is affecting the whole of the petal. But what if I just want to affect the edge? So what we can do is we can make a vertex group. So if I hide my modifiers for a second, we go back to our original shape. I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode, and I'm going to go into vertex mode. I'm just going to grab the vertexes on the edge here, something like that, and maybe these ones. And I'm going to make a vertex group. And what a vertex group does, it allows you to send an effect to just part of an object stored by whichever vertexes you've added in this sort of storage unit called a vertex group. So I'm going to go into the data tab down here, and under the tab vertex groups, I'm going to add one by pressing the plus icon, and I can name it. I can call it ripple, call it whatever we want, but ripples is fine. And then I need to hit assign. So that means that whatever I've got selected has been assigned to that group. If I deselect it and now click select, it'll show me that, okay, these vertexes are in that group. All right, so I'm going to go out of edit mode. I'll reveal my existing modifiers, and I'm going to add one more displacement modifier. And of course it's gone wacky because this is too high, so let's go 0.02. And we'll need to add a new texture like we did before, go into its tab, but before we start playing around, we're going to use this little setting down here, vertex group, and there's our group, ripples, and now it should just be affecting our edges. If I hide our original one and we go into this setting, let's just turn this up without changing the noise at all. Let's make that 4. Okay, there we go. It's just getting the edges. It's not getting the rest of the shape. And that's not actually too bad. If I turn the original one back on, okay, it's all a little bit too much now, so now we might rebalance it and turn this one down a bit. I might turn this one down a bit too, something like that. But that's getting kind of close. We've got like ripply edges and a little bit of organic shaping on the rest of the petal. I'm going to leave it like that. You can play around with yours more if you like. So let's just close off those modifiers and just leave them as they are. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to use this one petal to make an entire flower. So there's a few things we need to do. First of all, if I rotate this petal, at the moment it kind of rotates, you can see that dotted line, it rotates from the middle of, probably the middle of the original plane that we put down. Instead, I want it to rotate from down here because that's where the flower sort of has its rotational symmetry. Okay, perhaps to make it more realistic, before duplicating the petal, maybe let's add the texture. Then we'll see what we're working with. So what I have done, I went and I googled something like Oriental Lily petal texture, and I think I took this image, and oh look, there's a whole bunch of them. And then I just in Photoshop, I just cropped it out so there's just one petal, and then I removed the background. So what I've got, if I bring it up here, in my textures folder under flowers, I've got this PNG image where I've got an alpha channel, like it's transparent, and I've just got my petal. The way we're doing it, it will work with white as well, but you know, it's just a nice habit to get into when using textures like this. Okay, so let's add that texture onto our flower. So I've got my flower selected, and I'm in the shading tab conveniently, so I can make a new texture, and let's call it, I don't know, petal. And I'm going to drag in from my finder. I'll drag in, whoop, come on, I'll drag in the lily texture and bring that back over here. Okay, connect it up. And okay, it's not facing the right way now. We're seeing the texture, and then we're seeing all this black here, and that's just because our alpha channel is not being used yet. If I connect the alpha here, we'll get, again, it's not great, but at least we won't see the background. But let's fix up, that black is actually kind of helpful. Let's fix this up so that we've got the texture facing the right way, so the green part's there, and so that it's on the correct part of our petal. So let's go into our UV editing, and let's maybe look from the top. I'll go into face mode, select all, and okay, that's the textures I've got. So that's the UVs I've got, I guess, originally from the plane. So I'm just going to hit unwrap, and this time I'll do a cube projection. And oh, that's interesting. We're getting 2 islands. Now, why would we be getting 2 islands? That has come from, okay, so that part is separate, and I'm a little curious to know why. I wonder if we've got a hidden edge loop or something. Okay, I'm just going to go into my solid mode, turn off my modifiers. Why would we have that come in separately? Is it just that it's facing another way? Could be. Yeah, maybe the cube projection looked at it from that way. Okay, I was just checking. Sometimes when you do a UV unwrap, you find little mistakes you've made along the way. And I was just checking if it's one of those. Doesn't seem to be. Okay, so we've got two islands, so maybe we can link them back up together. That might be useful. So this one, this little island here, I'm just going to rotate it -90 so it's facing the right way. Oh, my proportional editing is still turned on. I'll turn that off. I'm going to grab all of them and rotate them R180, get them facing the right way. This island is going to be sort of the green area. This is going to be the flower. And I think what we want to do, if I just go here, we should be able to go UV stitch. Let me just try this. If I select here and these, and I click UV and stitch. I'm going blind. Where is stitch? Right there, okay. And then click. Okay, so that's stitched it back together. That's nice. So now we've just got one UV island. That's better. And then I'm just going to manually move these until we're sort of using as much of the useful part of our texture as possible. So I'll go into vertex select and I'll grab these and I might scale them on the y-axis. I'm going to grab these and I'm going to maybe do... Yeah, I see what I want. I don't want to go off my texture there because then we're going to see that either the alpha channel or the black part. So I just want to make sure I'm just selecting vertex by vertex here, that we're getting a nice usage of our texture that sort of matches the reality of the flower that we're making here. Oh, okay, I'm gonna, yeah, I'm squishing out my green part a little bit too much, so I might just bring these back towards the green. And then I think I can probably afford to scale this up on the Y a bit. Scale this up on the Y a bit. SY. And even here too. Just so we get some of those variations in color. Okay, that's probably okay. Let's have a look what happens if we right click, shade smooth, turn on our modifiers. That looks pretty good. Especially, you know, we'll be seeing it in lighting and there'll be lots of them. It looks like a flower petal to me. All right. So back to this idea of how do we go from one flower petal to a whole flower? All right, I'll go back into another area like layout or something like that. Okay, so, you know, what I could do, if I looked from the top, I could duplicate this and rotate it and try, oops. Oh, I've just hidden that one, sorry. And, you know, try to get it in the right position, but we can do better. We can make it easier and we can make it a little more precise. So as I was mentioning, first of all, I don't want it to rotate from here. I want it to rotate from here because that's kind of how flowers work. So we mentioned this in one of the earlier videos, but I'm just going to select something like maybe select my vertexes here and I'll press Shift S and I'll say cursor to selected. That's our 3D cursor. Think of it like, it's like a placeholder. It holds a position and then we can do things with that position. So my cursor is exactly in the middle of this little selection I made. Then I can click Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor. And it's changed my modifiers a little bit. That's just because we're using the local coordinates. Perhaps we can discuss that in class. It's not hugely relevant right now. But now if I press RZ, I'm rotating around the center. So that's the first thing we want. Okay, the next thing, we're going to do a little trick. With our 3D cursor still there, I'm going to press Shift A and I'm going to add an empty, a plain axis like that. I'll scale it down, something like that. And I'm going to call this Petal Rotator. All right, now I'm reminding myself I should make a new collection just from my flower. So I'll select the petal and the petal rotator, press M for move, click new collection and call it petal, let's call it flower 1, something like that. Okay, now, why did I create this empty? Well, I'll show you. I need to apply its scale first, so Command A, apply scale. Right, so we're going to use a different modifier now. This one is called an array, A-R-R-A-Y. What array usually does is, if I just click offset, it'll make a whole line of objects as sort of temporary instances. Really handy. But we don't want our objects going in a line. We want them going around this empty. So instead of relative offset, which is just offset by this number, if you want to make a line of objects, the array modifier is for you. We're going to use the object offset, and we're going to use our petal rotator. So at the moment it's done nothing, but if I click on this, click on the rotator, and I press RZ, it's made all of these petals. Okay, so it's pretty good. So let's be really specific. You know, how many petals should a flower have, and more importantly, how much should they be rotated? So I'm going to start with, I think 2, and I'm going to rotate this by a specific number, RZ 120. Okay, so now I'm going to make a third one. Okay, so why have I done that? Well, 120, that is 1/3 of 360. And if we look at flowers, what they have is they have 6 petals, and they've usually got 3 on top and 3 underneath. So that's what I'm recreating. Here's another image showing the same thing. If I just did, I could do like 6 of them and make this rotation on our empty 60, but they'd all be kind of like, if I go into my material preview, they'd all be sort of slightly on top of each other, and I think some flowers work like that, but this lily doesn't. And, you know, let's be accurate. So let's go back to 120, and I'll put my array back to 3. And then all I need to do is I'm just going to duplicate both of these. So I'm going to call this petal 1 and rotator 1, and I'm just going to select both of them, hit Shift D, and now I can just call them 2 and 2. And then with both of them selected, I'm just going to rotate them on the Z axis 60 degrees, and I'll move them down GZ just a little bit. And that is sort of, okay, if I grab my first one, I can see I've got a little bit of clipping here. This is overlapping. So I'll grab this one and just GZ. Oh no, maybe I need to grab the rotator, GZ. No, I need to grab both, lol. I need to grab both the rotator 1 and petal 1 and move them together. The reason I need to move them together is that they're sort of in a relationship with each other. If I just move one, it's actually changing the offset for all of them. Same if I just move the petals. So we needed to move both. Okay, so that's going to be my flower as a starting point. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the anther and the filament. Okay, so what are anthers and filaments? Well, if we look in our flower, we've got these little bits here. Oh, where's a better picture? These are our anther that have the pollen, and that's our filament. So this is going to introduce a couple of other techniques that are useful. So with our 3D cursor still in the same spot, it's exactly where we want it. I'm going to Shift A, and I'm going to add a Bezier curve, and it's going to be huge. So let's scale it by 0.1 and rotate it on the Y-axis by 90. It's still a bit big. Scale it down, GZ, something like that. That's pretty good. So now with this curve, I can just give it some geometry. If I go into its data, in its geometry tab, and if I go into round, bevel round, and give it a depth of something like, I don't know, 0.005. Yeah, that's not bad. Oh, I need to apply my scale. That was smaller than I thought. So if I press Command A, scale, okay, that didn't change the thickness. Okay, I guess that's an absolute measurement. Okay, so let's call this curve filament. Oh, I've got my caps lock on. Filament, okay. Okay, that's good. And technically our flower has 6 of them. The other thing I can do is I can put the little bit of pollen on the end. So let's do that. I'm going to use the end of the curve. I'm going to put my 3D cursor there, cursor to selected, go out of edit mode, and then I'm just going to Shift A. This time I'm just going to add a cube. It's coming very, very big, of course. So S for scale, 0.001. That's better. And maybe I'll just scale it on the Z axis and maybe rotate it on the X axis, something like that. Well, I'm not going to be too perfect here because this thing is tiny. And then I'm just going to add a subdivision surface modifier. And that's pretty good. If I want to get the shape a little bit more rounded, what I can actually do is I can add one edge loop here, and it'll sort of hold the shape in the middle. And if I go out of edit mode and shade smooth, that is pretty close, I think, to these things. You can you can get even more perfect with the shape, but that's enough for me. I feel like that's a little bit thin, so I'm going to go back into my curve. Let's make it, I'm going to change that 0.5 to a 1. Oh, no, I need to get rid of a 0 there apparently. That's better. Okay, and now let's just give them a color. So on this flower, let's look at one that's closer to the color. It's sort of a pale green color. I'm just going to be really simple. I'm going to make it one color for now. We could probably play around with giving it a more accurate color later, but let's just keep things simple now. I'm going to add a new material. I'll call it filament, and I'm just going to make it a very pale green. Something like that. And you could probably play around, if you want to play with the color, you could probably add like a color ramp and, you know, make the first color here green, maybe not so saturated, and the second color white. And you could play around and see if you can get the ramp to match, but you probably have to do a little bit more to get it to work. So I'm just going to leave it at that straight up green for now. And let's just add, these things are sort of like a brownish red color. So I'm going to add a new material and call it anther, and I'll just make a brownish red color. Grab an orange, I'll desaturate it a bit, and I'll make its value darker. Something like that. That's probably pretty close. Again, we could make a slightly, I'm going to rotate this on the Y just a little bit more. We could make a slightly more like interesting texture for that later, but remember that in your render, it's going to be so tiny that even if we make like a nice bumpy texture that matches that, very unlikely we're going to see it. So I'm just keeping things kind of simple now. Again, we could, I could array this on the empty again. But these things, to me, they're always at a slightly random angle, so I'm actually going to be a little bit lazy, and I'm just going to do some duplication. So with both of these selected, I'll drag them into my flower 1. Oh, and I need to name this one anther. So I'm going to grab the anther and the filament, Shift D, and I'm just going to rotate and have them all coming out of the center. Now I believe the flowers also have 6 of these. Let's check. I think if I can see a better picture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, and it's got this bit as well. I might just leave you to work that last bit out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then to have them not look too symmetrical, like that looks a little bit weird because they're all too similar. What I should be able to do is if I go into edit mode, grab this handle. How do I move these together? That. Can I do this? No, okay. That's a bit annoying. I can't think of a clever way to move them together, but basically I'm just going to use my the handles on the Bezier curve to just add a little bit of variation to these, so they don't all look too copy and pasted. I'll just look from the top, check that that's in the right spot. Looks good. Let's look back from the front again, grab this one. We can, I don't know, scale it, we can rotate it. Just give it a little bit of randomness. Let's check our angles to see that we're matching up in the same spot. Okay, I think this thing needs to be a little bit more coming from the center there. Let's just, okay. Why is that grabbing the whole curve, I wonder? Shouldn't be. Ah, we just need to have one handle selected. Okay, that's better. Let's look from the top. Put our anther on this flower. Look from the front. Okay, looking a bit better. And maybe these two are a bit too similar, so edit mode, just grab one handle, grab it, you can rotate it, you can stretch it, do whatever you like, and then just put your anther back on the right spot. And you'll probably, this is where you'll need your orthographic views to just check that things match up from different perspectives, because perspective view is not really good for orienting objects. Too much distortion. Okay, that I'm going to say that's okay for now for our flower. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to duplicate this flower, and I want to move all of these objects all together. So what I'll do is, because they're still where the 3D cursor is, I haven't moved anything yet, I'm going to Shift A, and I'm going to add one more empty, and I might move this one up a little bit so it's a bit easier for us to see. I'll scale it down, and I'm going to call this flower empty. Okay, and it's called, mine's called flower empty 5 just because I've already made some of these in another collection. But okay, we're going to do something here called parenting, which is not raising children, but it's making objects the child of something else, so that when we move that something else, it takes all of the children with it. So I'm going to select my petals, which at the moment are just 2 objects, because we've got, each one has an array of 3. And then I'm going to select my, with Shift, I'm going to select my filaments, and I can even select them here in my outliner. I can just grab everything here actually, same. But the last thing I select has to be my empty. So if I hold down, I think, if I just hold down my Shift and I go to find my flower, oh, I'm going to select all of these, and okay, then I'm holding Command or the Apple key or Control if you're on a PC. Basically, I want one of the objects is going to be active, which is the yellow, and all of the others are going to be passive. The active object is usually just the last thing you've selected. In the outliner, it's the last thing you've selected. Sorry, in the 3D viewport, it's the last thing you've selected. In the outliner, it's the opposite. So if I Shift select all of these, the anther here is yellow. I'm just going to use Command on a Mac and click flower empty. So the flower empty is yellow, and all of the other ones are that sort of darker reddy orange color. Okay, then I'm just going to go Command P, set parent or object parent to object. And what it's done, it's put all of these things kind of like underneath the flower empty. You've also got to make sure that all of the objects you're doing this to are in the same collection. If they're not, it does this weird thing where your outliner will just look a bit wrong because it'll look like some things are still outside while they're actually parented. Just put everything in the same collection and then do your parenting. And once you've got that, you can actually just move the whole flower. You can even scale it, you can rotate it, you can treat it like it's all one object, which is very convenient. Because what we're going to do now, I'm just going to move my flower until, I'm going to scale it until it's where I want it to be. I'm going to make 2, but you can make as many as you like until it looks good. Okay, so now, if I want to make another flower, I can't just duplicate this empty. If I hit Shift D, I just duplicate the empty. I have to duplicate all of the objects. So if I X and delete that one, if I've got my flower empty here, I just need to open it up, Shift grab everything, and then Shift D to duplicate. And now I can just click on my empty and do the same thing. So I'm going to have like 2 flowers, something like that. And I can rename the empties and call it, I don't know, flower empty. You might call yours 1 and 2 or something like that. So we're almost finished. Now all we need to do is add the stems. And I think you can probably guess by now how we're going to do it. We're just going to do exactly like we did for these filaments. We're just going to add a Bezier curve and extrude its profile to give it some thickness. So I'll press Shift A, add a curve, Bezier curve, S for scale, scale it down, RY90, G for grab, scale it, and maybe RZ so we can see which way its curve's going. We can even use the curve almost exactly as it is here. It's pretty close. I might just check that it's kind of inside my vase. It's not, it's a bit high, so I'm just going to grab this handle and bring it down. I can grab that handle. If you want another handle, you can, with the last handle selected, just press E and you'll get another one. I wouldn't recommend having too many because it's not going to be a super bendy, wobbly object. You can also scale the handles and that will sort of help adjust the shape of your curve. But basically I just want this handle or this curve to finish at the base of my flower. So I'm just going to do that using my orthographic views. Oops, I deselected my handle. Something like that. I'll just in perspective fix it up. That looks pretty close. Okay. And then that looks a little bit too bendy, so I might just tighten it up a little bit. Okay. So if I go back into my solid view, go into my data, scroll down to the geometry and just add some depth here. We can add some thickness. Don't need too much. And then we can also add a material. I can call it like stem, and I might just make it a very pale green color. If you select a color, you can also just change its saturation and value here. That can make life a little easier. And I might even add a tiny bit of subsurface translucency to make it look a little bit alive, a little bit planty. Okay, I think it's still a little bit too green. Let me just check my reference. Yeah, I think it's maybe my green needs to be a little bit more yellow, maybe a little bit more saturated, maybe a tiny bit darker, something like that. Okay, and then let's just, I can even now just duplicate this one. I'll name it here. I'll call it stem 1. I'll put it in my flower collection. Shift D, and let's just edit the, well, let's just rotate it maybe. And because we don't want them to look exactly the same, let's just play around with it a little bit. Something like that. And again, we'll have to check where, yeah, we're not in the right spot. Let's look from the top. Bring it over. I can go into my wireframe mode. I can rotate it. That probably makes sense. Maybe scale it down a little. We're almost there. Maybe rotate it so it's really coming from inside the plant. Good. Good. Okay. And that's the flowers. So I think you can see like the flowers with just 2 looks a little bit sad. These type of flowers, usually you have a whole bunch. So what I did when I was playing around, I just duplicated more. If I go back to my flowers and my original vase, the modifiers one, I made a whole bunch. But the process is exactly the same, and all you need to do is make 1 petal, and then the rest you can play around. Finally, one thing I should mention, let's say we want to change the color of our flowers. We can do that. If we add in a hue saturation value, it might not work perfectly, but we can play around a little bit. Like what if I make the hue 0.6? Now I've sort of got these like yellow, pink, these flowers come in so many different varieties. Like there's this kind of orange, really bright orange one. So you can have fun with it. and it's a good excuse to play around with your shaders. But yeah, okay. So this is it for this tutorial. And again, I'm trying to keep the tutorials quite simple. Your goal here is to learn the skills, but then really treat this as a starting point and to start to make your own work something that you find interesting. You know, you can change things, you can look up some new skills online, you can talk to your tutor. This is just getting the basics covered. Okay, I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye-bye.